Merry Christmas, almost, and welcome to our last stream of 2023. We're keeping it casual, so it is a Q&A for you today, for which I'm joined by Ash. You in that festive spirit already?
I'm keeping it very casual and festive. I would normally never ever drink on a live stream, but it's nearly time for my annual leave. The out of office is on, so what's there to lose?
And what is that? That looks like a Negroni or something. You're drinking a cocktail on air.
I am. It is an old fashioned, which is my absolute favorite cocktail,
Mm.
made with a syrup which has been infused with Christmassy spices because truly that festive, Michael. I'm into it.
Oh, I'm very jealous. I've just got a cup of tea and some Haribo. I want an old fashioned, maybe later. Fazu Halim asks, with all the evidence of war crimes caught on video, why aren't Israel and the US being charged? Ash, do you want to go at that one?
Yeah, so there's a quite straightforward reason, which is that the ICC can conduct investigations into war crimes in Israel and Palestine. But Israel never signed up to the Rome Statute, which recognizes the authority of the International Criminal Court. It is not a member of the International Criminal Court. And from the Israeli perspective, that makes total sense because if you're an expansionist colonizer and you know that you're going to want to carry out ethnic cleansing, you want to maintain an illegal occupation, you want to maintain an illegal blockade on Gaza, which of course has now turned into the horrific ground invasion and aerial bombardment. Why would you want to sign up to a legal framework which would hold you responsible for the things that you do? Part of the argument that Israel makes is that because Palestine isn't a sovereign state, it can't be a member of the ICC. It can't uh, sign up to the Rome Statute. So there's twofold reasons. One is if you're Israel and you know you want to do war crimes, why would you become a member of the International Criminal Court? And then the second thing is that it doesn't recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. So it doesn't recognize Palestine's ability to sign up to the Rome Statute. And as far as I know, I don't think that the US is a member of the International Criminal Court either, because, yeah, if you want to do war crimes, you wouldn't sign up.
Yeah, international law is only for little people. Big superpower states don't seem to have to abide by it, which really undermines the whole thing. But there we go. And I don't, what we still don't talk about the United States as a rogue state, right? They won't join the International Criminal Court, yet we sort of let them talk about war crimes and the ethics of war and Israel being the most moderate army or the most ethical army in the world. Well, if they're that ethical, sign up for the ICC. Let's test it in court. Let's go to Elliot Wilmo asks, do you think the Tories will swing to the far right with Braverman and Farage, or will the moderates take control of the party? I'll start with this. I mean, I don't think Farage will join the party sort of in time to run to be its next leader. Though I could be wrong there. I think it's kind of a dead cert that the right of the party will lead it after this election. It's definitely going to have enough support within the parliamentary party to get on the ballot, and then I'm pretty sure that the Tory membership is pretty goddamn right wing right now. For me, the biggest question is, will that be successful on a nationwide level? We still haven't quite, as much as people, Boris Johnson wasn't far right, essentially, as much as he sort of said offensive things, he wasn't a far right figure. So we still haven't quite tested whether or not Britain will look kindly upon a far right leader of the Conservative Party. We're in the first past the post system. Obviously, that damaged Corbyn, didn't it? I think in a proportional representation system, he could have done quite well. But I think it is the case that in two-party systems, you can struggle when you've got one of the sort of extreme wings of the party. But you can look to the United States. Obviously, a far-right Republican Party won the presidency. All across Europe, we are seeing far-right politicians make gains that didn't seem imaginable only a couple of decades ago. So it remains to be seen. I mean, I suppose arguments as to why a far right Tory party could be successful is that Labour don't seem to have many obvious plans that will make Keir Starmer's prime ministership a success. They might pull some stuff out of the bag. They'll have to break their fiscal rules if they want to bring about growth. So let's hope he's lied to the public like he lied to the Labour membership. But there we are. The other argument I think in favour of the far right of the Tories doing well on a national level is that these issues that have become hot button issues, such as small boat crossings, will continue. I don't think there is any way that the Labour Party will be able to stop them unless they sign a deal with the European Union to sort of say when people cross the channel, we'll send them back, but in return, we're going to take some of your asylum seekers. I'd personally be in favour of that. I think that would be a sensible and smart policy. Um, I think it would potentially be electorally very difficult. I think the far right of the Tory party would see some opportunities there. Ash, I suppose, the question, will the Tories swing to the right? And then my sort of addendum, will that be successful on a nationwide level?
Yeah, so I think the Tories are going to swing to the right. And the reason why I think that is that even though you've got this sort of attempted rallying of the moderates, David Cameron returning to frontline politics to become Rishi Sunak's foreign secretary, I don't think that's going to be enough for the so called moderates to retain control of the Conservative Party. One, because there simply isn't a big enough parliamentary constituency for that. We saw the size of the rebellion, pretty significant on Rishi Sunak's attempted Rwanda fudge. And two, that's just not where the Tory party membership is. And ironically, this is a problem which David Cameron was a part of creating, because before David Cameron became Conservative Party leader, the Conservative Party was not a particularly democratic institution. The way in which leaders emerged was a complicated system of balloting amongst Conservative Party MPs, and the membership didn't really get a look in. That changed because now you've got the complex system of balloting, which whittles down the candidates to two, and then it's one member, one vote. And that was something which was first celebrated as modernising the Conservative Party. But I think that was also a big part of the UKIPification of the Conservative Party, because the grassroots were able to combine with other political actors outside of the Conservative Party to force the policy agenda in a much more Eurosceptic and right wing direction. So, against those structural elements, there's not going to be a moderate resurgence, in my opinion. Rishi Sunak, who, of course, don't forget, was a first generation Brexiteer. He was on the Brexit side of the referendum in 2015, 2016, in a way that Liz Truss wasn't. He's now being cast as left wing and liberal for the Conservative Party. So that shows you how far things have moved. I think whether or not the sort of right wing lurch of the Conservative Party will be successful electorally, you're totally right to make the point that a lot of that depends on Keir Starmer. What's he going to pull out of the bag? Is there going to be some level of ambition to stem or even reverse the kind of accelerated national decline that we seem to be stuck in? And then the second thing is, what is the economic component of a right wing Tory offer going to be? Because, of course, we focused on the nationalist and populist elements of Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister and Boris Johnson's programme. All of those things were really, really important. But part of what allowed him to secure that 80-seat majority, as well as promising to get Brexit done, was that there was going to be a degree of redistribution. Now, it wasn't going to come through what we would want, which is taxing the wealthy, but it would be sort of rearranging spending allocation away from the southeast and towards the Midlands and the north, particularly those constituencies which had voted Conservative. Now, that never really got off the ground because Boris Johnson wasn't a serious political operator. As soon as he got into number 10, he spent all his time masturbating and picking out wallpaper. He didn't actually want to follow through on what he said he was going to do and the mandate that secured his place in number 10. But another Tory leader, if they were smart, I think could revive levelling up, could put some serious money behind it, and combine that with a sort of, Georgia Maloney style right wing program. And that's something which I think could be relatively electorally successful in this country, particularly if contrasted against an uninspiring and perhaps even unpopular Labour government.
Mm, interesting. Lighter-hearted question. Faizi Saad asks Ash, how did it feel calling Piers Morgan an idiot to his face on his own show?
Do you know something? It felt really awful at the time, because what happened is I was on to promote the anti-Trump demonstrations, and I had my little notes and my list of talking points, and Piers Morgan did what he's very, very good at, which is he successfully derailed me from the thing that I wanted to talk about. But then the thing which I did, and this was purely because I lost my temper and not because I had it, in my back pocket as a secret plan. Then I derailed him with a "I'm literally a communist, you're an idiot," that whole thing. But I felt like I'd really failed. I thought I'd fucked up. I felt like I'd let the movement down. At the time, I'd really just started seeing my partner, who's now my husband, and he's someone who at the time was working on the left in communications. And so I rang him up. I was crying my eyes out. I was like, I fucked up so badly. I just lost my mind on Good Morning Britain. I started yelling about communism, and he was like, look, I haven't seen it, but let's watch it together when you feel ready. We can go through what you could have done differently. Everyone has a bad interview, don't worry. And then 5 minutes later, he rang me and he was like, what are you talking about? That's the funniest thing that I've ever seen. This is amazing. And I went home and I hid under my duvet because I really thought I'd messed up and I felt like I'd let everybody down. And then when I woke up, my phone was exploding. And I went to a pub. I went to a pub with my partner in Walthamstow, and everyone was wanting to buy me a drink. People I'd never met before, never seen before. So my perception of how I'd done and everyone else's perception of how I'd done were really wildly different. Um, I'm proud of it now in hindsight, but at the time I felt absolutely atrocious.
I mean, it was great for our YouTube channel. It's still by I think about it's our most popular video by I think about 5 times. It had about 5 million views last time I watched. So I'm very glad you went on that show and called Piers Morgan an idiot. My shout out if you found this channel by watching Ash call Piers Morgan an idiot. If that brought any of you here, make yourselves known. My pal Footfoot on YouTube Super Chat says, Merry Christmas, and please remember social care workers working over Christmas. I'm working Christmas Eve to Boxing Day. Thank you so much for your super chat and for your hard work working Christmas Eve to Boxing Day. I feel a bit bad now. We're clocking off after this Q&A. We said we're keeping it casual because Christmas is around the corner. Obviously, as a social worker working in the NHS, so many industries, it's very difficult to keep it casual because the work keeps on coming. People still need to be supported. You can't just say, "Oh, it's Christmas. Can you get yourself out of bed? Can you keep yourself company? Can you sort your health needs yourself?" No, you're going to have to go to work. So our solidarity to you, and from the whole of Novara media team. I think probably from the whole of the country. Although you do worry, don't you? This kind of clap for carers situation where everyone's like, "Oh, think of the social workers when it comes to Christmas," and then if the social workers go on strike and ask for a healthcare worker, I think you are, wouldn't it? A social care worker. If they go on strike and ask for a pay rise, everyone will be, "Oh, those greedy social care workers." So let's give you both positive vibes and a pay rise in 2024. Hannah says, it feels like bad news after bad news right now. What makes you feel hopeful and positive for 2024? Ash, shall I go to you first on that one?
Yeah, so I think there's two things which make me feel hopeful and positive about 2024. One is I think after a period of defeat and licking our wounds, what I'm seeing on the non-parliamentary left, so people that aren't predominantly involved with the Labour Party as their main form of political activity, who do other forms of organising, are really thinking quite seriously about what forms of organising are going to be most successful. And I think you can see the beginning of some of these new or perhaps revived strategies with Workers for Palestine, Health Workers for a Free Palestine, which is a way of uniting the trade union movement with what's often seen as like a single issue cause to broaden out and deepen the connections between organized labor and internationalism. And that's something which you've seen in, you know, l- places here and there. Helena, No Justice, MTG, No Justice, MTG. There we go. I always think of it as Marjorie Taylor Greene in my head, except I know it stands for Magic the Gathering. No Justice MTG pointed out that you had the Bob Crow brigades, who are RMT workers, who went off to, fight for the Kurds in Rojava. So you've had this tradition on the left, but I think it's something which is being revived, and that makes me feel really hopeful. Another thing which makes me feel hopeful is that you're seeing some wins for organised labour. You're seeing that with pay deals for the RMT, pay deals in the NHS, and of course, the end of the Writers Guild of America SAG-AFTRA strikes, which negotiated a historic deal between people who work in film and television and the streaming giants. So those are two things that make me feel hopeful: the power of organised labour and the connections being made between organised labour and other causes within the movement.
I like this comment. I found the channel elsewhere, but was pleasantly surprised to learn Ash worked here. My first thought was, hey, it's that I'm literally a communist lady. I'm sure that is a thought many people share. I'm going to go to this question about what makes you feel hopeful and positive, because it's something I worry about quite a lot, because I'm actually quite positive about human progress and development generally. Life expectancy is raising, economic growth is going up, incomes on the whole are going up, people's quality of life is improving. I'm reading Steven Pinker, The Better Angels of Our Nature. I think it's sneered at by many people on the left, but I think it's very well evidenced. He's sort of saying, actually, violence on the whole has massively declined over the course of human civilization. The trajectories we're on aren't that bad. And when it comes to climate change, obviously that could put a spanner in the works. But I mean, I've said this on shows recently. I do think we are going in the right direction when it comes to climate change. The issue is just, can we do it fast enough? Right? There are the technological solutions out there, the innovations out there, which mean that we can get to net zero fairly goddamn quickly. We might need to brighten some clouds in the meantime, a little bit of geoengineering on the sides, but we can get down to net zero pretty quickly. We need the political will to get there. But again, I think we have made great strides in the past 5 years or so when it comes to climate change. So I am quite optimistic about, human civilization in general. And the reason that worries me somewhat is because on a news show, the news tends to be what's going on, which is disastrous. Obviously we've been talking about Gaza for the past 3 months or so, quite rightly, as we should be, because there is a severe, deep injustice going on where there are thousands of people, innocent people being killed, 2 million people having their lives destroyed by a state acting with impunity. But I think sometimes that gives people, the impression that we're all going to hell in a handcart. There is nothing to live for. There's no hope in this world. I actually think, the world is full of good news stories. But the news, we tend to focus on sort of the immediate injustice which is going on right now, which I think is good. But I feel like maybe I should have some space in the show for talking about why I'm sort of positive about civilization in general. I know that's a controversial statement I've just made, Ash. What do you think about my what's the opposite of doomerism? Optimism, I suppose, about civilization and human progress.
Yeah, well, I think that you wouldn't be on the left if you didn't have a belief in the power of human cooperation, right? You would be a lot more cynical. I think you would be a lot more defeatist, and there'd be no point in wanting a better society if you think we simply don't have it in us. So I think it's that famous Gramsci quote: it's all about pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. And that sometimes, I think, a bit misinterpreted, which is like, just be hopeful in spite of everything. But I think it also means paying close attention to things that are going well and remembering that that's a result of human efforts. It's not just something which has happened from the hand of God.
Let's go. Oh, David McCart. I felt the same way after reading Pinker, but then learned half of his references are completely wrong. I'll have to look into that. I mean, what is undeniable, if you look at, life expectancy, any life expectancy chart, I mean, massively going up. If you look at sort of global incomes, massively going up. The amount of energy produced by renewable sort of measures, massively going up. So I'll have to look into these references for Pinker, of which you speak. But I still think the idea that sort of civilization tends to go in a decent direction is not as sort of crazy or naive as it can sometimes sound. 99 on YouTube Super Chat asks, Michael Walker, you've been elected as PM under a landslide victory for the Novara party. What is your first term? Okay, proportional representation. I think, no one wants to do it after a landslide victory because the electoral system has just put them in power. So it can seem sort of bizarre. Why would you, with all that power you've just been given, take some away from you? But I think in the long term, proportional representation is definitely going to be in the interest of all of us. I think I would, and this is sort of at the top of my mind now, obviously, say the UK, as a permanent member of the Security Council, we need to reform the UN. It is ridiculous that a country like us has a permanent veto and a country like India, the most populous in the world, doesn't. So I would sort of make Britain a champion for the democratic reform of international institutions. I think we often think of Britain as a sort of mid-tier power, which it is. I mean, if you look at the economy, if you look at the military, but there are certain aspects, particularly that permanent seat on the Security Council, where we are, the absolute top, one of the five most important countries in the world. So I think we should basically use that position to say, look, the world has changed. We're willing to give away our power in the interest of reform. I think that could do some very interesting things to politics, because you could have sort of like a UK government, which would then become massively allied with countries on the up like India, who'd sort of, I think they'd be very appreciative of that kind of thing. And then the thing you need, so both of those things might seem a bit abstract to the general public. So obviously, if you want to get re-elected, if you want to have the mandate to do those controversial things, you're going to have to raise people's living standards. I think I'd do that by borrowing shed loads of money for green investment everywhere. Create quite a lot of good high-paying jobs by greening everything. Give people free insulation, free solar panels on their roof, so sort of people feel like, oh, I've got something since these guys got elected, and that will enable you to do those sort of more. I mean, it shouldn't be controversial to reform the UN, but I can see you getting attacked for giving away the power of the UK on the UN and for reforming our democracy. Freddie Angels asks, is democracy dying with corruption? Is it time for a new way of selecting candidates? Ooh, interesting. Ash, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, so I think that the political system that you have and the politics that you have is a reflection of the class forces in society. So no wonder things feel and are really undemocratic when you have historic concentrations of wealth. The workers' share that they take home in the form of wages is really, really low, right, compared to other points in the last 100 years. So for me, it's not about going, is there a new way of selecting candidates? Of course, I think that there are better and there are worse ways of selecting candidates. I'm a big fan of open selection because I think it means that you get new talent and you also create a disciplining feature for right wing MPs. I think it's one of the big mistakes of Corbynism. But I think ultimately, you've got to deal with concentrations of wealth and the deliberate weakening of working class power if you want to get something like an uncorrupt democracy. What about you, Michael?
Um, I think the signs for democracy aren't amazing. And it's strange to say that because I'm sort of generally optimistic about human civilization. But if you look at the most powerful democracy in the world, the United States, they might be about to re-elect Donald Trump, and he does seem to. I'm not into Trump derangement syndrome, but I mean, it's very difficult to look at American democracy and say yes, that's healthy, right? And I think that will be very challenging. I mean, in the Netherlands, you've had Geert Wilders become the largest party, and again, that doesn't seem to bode particularly well for democracy. So, I mean, let's say democracy has some serious challenges um, at the moment. Is that all because of corruption? I mean, to some degree. I mean, in the United States, definitely it has a lot to do with corporate power, and it has a lot to do with Fox News. To be frank, it has a lot to do with billionaires sort of buying up the media, sort of creating monsters they can't control, and then now you have sort of a complete breakdown of political society, partly instilled by those. I think social media is also making it very difficult to sort of have democracies where we all live in the same sort of thought worlds, because people are sort of reading completely different things. Now, obviously, there are opportunities as well as challenges here, but I think you know the future of democracy is very, very uncertain and unsure. Yeah, that's definitely one to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on democracy. My top tip for 2024. Right. I don't want to sound glib here, but as I say, it's the casual last show of the week. Nick Claffey on Super Chat says, I'm a massive fan and I watch every night, but I was disappointed you didn't cover Mark Drakeford resigning. If it was the Scottish Parliament, you definitely would cover it. Enjoy the holidays. I'll take your point. I'm not going to argue with it, but I will say the discussion we had on the day when it happened was I didn't see how it was a surprise, because Mark Drakeford had always said he wasn't going to stand at the next election. So he'd always said he was going to resign before the next election, and you have to resign with sort of a lead in for a new candidate to take over and be able to fight the election. So It seemed more like a formality to me. It seemed just sort of like someone carrying through with something they had already pledged. I didn't understand the headlines that were sort of suggesting it was a shock resignation because he'd said he would resign in good time to have someone else fight the election. But it might be that I've got that slightly wrong. And we did cover his original announcement and sort of discussed it um, then. Um, Ellen Rebecca Davies asks, "How did you get into politics? I'm 23, but wouldn't know how to get my foot in the door." Let's go to you, Ash.
Yeah, so I was always interested in politics, but it was never the politics of like, oh, what's going on in the House of Commons. I was always really interested in radical politics. So I was part of the anti-war movement, part of an organization called School Students Against the War. When I was 16, that was when Operation Cast Lead was happening, which was one of the times Israel bombarded Gaza. I was quite involved with the Palestine movement then. And then my first year of university is when the coalition government trebled tuition fees. So there was suddenly this massive anti-austerity movement, and I was a part of it. Um, as part of like the black bloc set of anarchists running around masked up and feeling very vital and important. How my politics evolved was that I became more interested in mass politics. So I think that that kind of horizontalist organizing can be really important. I think those moments of rupture and street presence can be really, really important. But ultimately, on the day to day, they're quite minoritarian. They can often be really untrusting. And it's not about building outwards. Sometimes it's about demanding people come inwards. And I think that that's something which makes it really difficult to speak to people who aren't in quite a similar life situation to yourself. Um, and it was out of that kind of activism that I first met Aaron Bastani, that I first met James Butler. 2015 started getting involved with Novara Media. So that might not sound like something which is very easy to replicate, but I think that there are some ingredients from that that you can generalize. So one is that you don't have to participate in institutions that are already powerful in order to become involved in politics in a meaningful way. You can start by becoming active with the causes that speak most to you, that move your heart the most, and you can just see where that takes you. The second thing is that the most important ingredient, I think, in being on the left is uh, friendship, comradeship, finding people who you align with politically and who you trust. Because if you're in a situation where it's really untrusting, you're not going to be able to build anything. You're just going to keep tearing each other down. But when you find those people, there's a really high level of trust and there's a high level of affection. I think you can do an awful lot. I mean, looking at Novara, we didn't pay ourselves for very many years. We were a volunteer run organization. The first people that we paid were the people that wrote for us. So there wasn't anyone who had the word editor in their title who got paid. And in order to, grease the wheels of non-payment, we really, really had to like each other. So I think that that's something which you can um, extract and run with. All you need is to be more than one person. I think the ideal number for getting anything started is three, right? You just need two mates, and I think you can get stuff started. Um, if the question that you're asking is like, how do you get involved in political media? How do you get involved in like Westminster politics? I've got no idea because I never succeeded in doing those things, but did succeed in building something with mates.
I just seen a comment. Steven Pinker's philosophy is that everything's fine, so nothing has to change. That might be his philosophy. I would argue against the idea that for political action to be worthwhile, everything has to be terrible. I think if you think that sort of politics, the economy, people's livelihoods are sort of going in kind of the right direction, life expectancy is increasing, it's an argument against revolution. It sort of says, well, why would you collapse everything and risk, you know, something wholly new if things are generally going in the right direction? I think it is an argument against revolution. I don't think it's an argument against sort of getting involved in politics and reform, because while things might be generally going in the right direction, for one, that's not guaranteed. The Nazis could have won World War II, for example. It's not guaranteed that things will continue moving in the right direction. But also, even if on average life expectancies are increasing, even if on average people around the world are getting richer, there's still a hell of a lot of injustice that we should be sort of campaigning to correct, and we should be sort of guiding this in a more a better direction. That's why I'm a social democrat, right? Massive reformist. I feel like we want to capture what's decent about capitalism, but get rid of the bits that aren't decent, and try and sort of have as inclusive a society as possible. So I argue against this sort of thing where people say, well, if you think that if you point out good news, then you're essentially conservative because you're saying nothing needs to change. I think you can sort of have a sort of optimistic approach to politics, sort of saying things are, it's not a catastrophe what's happening, but it could be better. Obviously, that's on a global level. You can pick out a particular locality, and that's obviously not the case in Gaza. That's not the case. It doesn't matter in Gaza if global life expectancy is increasing when you're in a open air prison being bombed, right? But different sort of approaches to different topics or different scales, let's say. You know the score. You are watching Novara Media, and we are a viewer funded organization. Everything we do is only possible because of our regular donors. If you are one already, thank you so much, and especially happy Christmas to you. If you aren't one yet, you can go to novaramedia.com/support and set up a monthly donation, anything from £1. Very much appreciated. Our traditional ask was always for a hour's wage a month, but whatever you feel you can afford will be very much appreciated, so we can continue to grow, continue to increase the quality of our output. We really do appreciate it. I was going to say we went nightly this year, but I think probably we went nightly last year. We've been doing it a while now, haven't we? Let's go to another comment. Someone's had their own response to how to get involved in politics. They say, join a union. That's Nadeem on the super chat. And Buckley Illustrate asks, is it likely Israel steals Gaza and the West Bank and the West does nothing about it? That is a $1 million question. I think Israel seems to be thinking, if we do it, obviously with Gaza, they're sort of speeding up the process. I think they thought that October the 7th gave them the opportunity to try and do ethnic cleansing really quickly. I think what Israel have been hoping is if they do this slowly enough, slowly encroach on Palestinian land in the West Bank, slowly destroy any capacity for self-governance by the Palestinians, that they'll have created facts on the ground, so severe, so incontrovertible, and that the rest of the world will have to sort of say, okay, yeah, we didn't like that you did this, but you've done it, and therefore we're going to forget about it. They basically want to do what the other settler colonial nations did in the 18th and 19th century, but now, which is essentially say we're going to get rid of the native population, and everyone sort of afterwards, you might have a Memorial Day. What do they have in America? Indigenous Peoples Day or something, where sort of once a year you have to sort of say, oh, we're so sorry for the civilization that we wiped out and killed. But ultimately, let's let bygones be bygones. I think the big frustration in Israeli politics is that they never got to do that. They're like, you got to do, the United States, Australia, Canada, you all got to do that. Why can't we do that? They're like, well, because you're in the 21st century now, I'm afraid. When they were created, you're in the 20th century now, I'm afraid. After the Second World War, there was a taboo around genocide, and I'm quite glad there was a taboo around genocide, right? But they're thinking, oh, these other countries got to do it. Well, guess what? Sorry for you, but you're living in the 20th and 21st century. So I think it's Tony Judt that called Israel an 18th or 19th century project started in the 20th century. So they want to do that. They want to say, well, they want to do it, basically an incredible historical injustice, but then sort of do it quickly, and then afterwards sort of say, okay, well, let's let bygones be bygones. A bit like what the Sri Lankans did to the Tamils, actually. Well, not the Sri Lankans, because the Tamils were Sri Lankan, but the Sinhalese, wasn't it, did to the Sri Lankan government did to the Tamils, where they sort of said there was quite a lot of opprobrium towards them for a few months when they sort of said, we're going to wipe out the Tamil Tigers by military means. Lots and lots of people died, lots and lots of human rights violated, but they were like, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take the heat, do it quickly, and then afterwards people will let bygones be bygones. That basically worked for them. I mean, their economy is a bit screwed at the moment because they made some strange decisions regarding farming. But that particular problem, in scare quotes, for the Sri Lankan government was resolved. That's what the Israelis want to do. Unfortunately, the eyes of the world are on them, and the Palestinians do have a lot of allies who make that impossible. So, difficult to say. Teresa Easton with 20 quid. I first saw Ash speaking at a media festival in Sheffield with Loki. This got me hooked to Tisky. Ash, you're doing us proud. You're doing God's work.
Do you know something? The media festival itself was really, really great, and I'm glad I did it. But that was one of the worst evenings of my life for a completely unrelated reason. Because that was when Spurs were playing Liverpool in the final of the Champions League, and of course, we lost. And I was in a pub in Sheffield surrounded by Liverpool fans because there's obviously not
Mm.
loads and loads of Spurs supporters in Sheffield. And I was completely and utterly devastated. And this was a point my relationship where he wasn't that into Spurs. That has changed now due to like the immersion therapy of living with me. So he just didn't understand why I was crying and like inconsolable and like didn't want to go out dancing later. Like he just didn't understand what it meant to me. So it was a great media festival. It was really, really great getting to speak alongside Loki. I think that Natalie Bennett was on the same panel as well, if I remember correctly. But the rest of it, terrible night, bad night, no good, horrible, very bad.
Damn. Oh, this is a nice question. This is going to go straight to you as well, Ash. JD Jacob asks, "What are you all proud of that happened this year?"
I'm proud of loads of things that happened this year. Um, I was I was saying this in my one-to-one with my line manager Gary, which is that I think it's been a real year of improvement for Novara Media, and I'm really glad that we've made all the new hires that we have. I'm really glad that we're working on some new content products, which hopefully will get cracking on publishing next year. But I think if I had to single out one piece of work that I was really, really proud of participating with. It was an article that I wrote with additional reporting by Simon Childs, who I'd never worked with that closely before we worked on this story together. So it was really, really great because I got to know him in a totally new way. I also got to work on this story. What this story was that these documents marked top secret had been left in central London locations, and someone had found them and very, very surreptitiously and covertly handed them to me, thinking, of course, that they were genuine top secret documents. We wrote up the story as if they were top secret documents and then went through the final process of verifying them, which is going to the Cabinet Office. Now, in the meantime, we'd been freaking out because we were like, "Oh my god, these are marked top secret." A lawyer was already advising us that we were potentially already in breach of the Official Secrets Act, and me and Simon were like, "Holy fuck, are we going to go to jail for like a really long time?" Like, Jesus Christ. We go to the Cabinet Office. Cabinet Office are like, "Yeah, these are not genuine documents. They're not ours, and this isn't the first we've heard of documents like this being found in central London locations." And of course, that was intensely disappointing because you do get your hopes up. You hope this is going to be your like Woodward and Bernstein moment, or the president's men lifting the lid on what's going on in the heart of government. And when we were sitting with that disappointment, I was saying to Simon, we've got to find out who's actually behind these forged top secret documents. And he was like, yeah, 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 we should. But I don't think that he thought it was particularly likely we were going to get to the bottom of it. And to be honest, I didn't think it was likely either. But I put feelers out. I was talking to people. I had a working theory about what kind of person might be behind these documents. And not only was that working theory kind of proved correct, there was a couple of red herrings, but ultimately I found the guy who'd forged these documents and he wanted to talk to me. And I wanted to talk to him because I wanted to understand what could get someone to the point of forging top secret documents. What was the information that he really wanted out there and people to engage with? And it was, of course, about climate change. Now, all the information in the documents was legitimate, it was factual, but the packaging that it came in was like a complete hoax. Um, and the reason why I found this so exciting to take part in is that one, it felt like a classic whodunit, and there is this part of me which loves a detective story, and being cast in the role of super sleuth, I just loved it. But then the second thing that we've been working on as an organization is how do we get people to engage with climate stories? Because whenever we do an audience survey, the thing that we hear back from people is we really want you to do more climate content. The problem is that we make climate content and the click through rate isn't that good. And I think it's because people feel so despairing and they feel like they already know the story. So even if there's new information, it's not really new information because they know how bad it is. It's difficult to make content about climate change that people want to click on, that they want to stay with, and they want to read. When we published this story, and quite deliberately, me and Simon wrote it in a particular way. We were very inspired by the way in which stories are told on This American Life, where there's a clear sense of perspective, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And we wanted to tell it like it was a ripping yarn. And that really did bear out in terms of the shares that we got, the number of people that were clicking through on the story. So that's the piece of work that I'm most proud on because it was really fun to put together. And it was also really instructive for how do you get people to engage with climate change when they feel that they already know the story.
I'll answer very quickly. I mean, I think we've added 250,000 subscribers on YouTube over the past 3 months, sort of almost doubled where we were before, and that's mainly from Palestine content, which I'm quite proud of. I think how we sort of stepped up as an organisation to cover that. It was, and I suppose this is another thing I'm pondering next year is I've always wanted to do more international content, but we've had the same problem that Ash was just talking about with climate change, where it's sort of you do have a much smaller click through rate for it. And obviously, we don't just do stuff for clicks, but you do want lots of people to watch what you're doing. There's no point in putting out content which people aren't watching. So that means we've tended to sort of limit how much international content we do. Now, it's the case that with the dreadful war on Gaza, it's an international story that people really want to know about for very good reason. And I'm sort of thinking in my head, how can we sort of continue to do international stories that sort of are still really, really engaging the audience? So let me know if you've got any ideas. I mean, we'll obviously we're not waiting for you to send our ideas to do it. Obviously, we will just do more international stories and try and sort of pitch them so that people want to watch them. But that's sort of what I'm most proud of this year, and where I sort of a question that I ponder often. Apparently, it was this year that we went 5 days in February. God, well, that's not time flies, is it? That's time feels bloody slow. If I thought it was further away than it was, but so we've only been doing this since February now. my my lifestyle actually didn't change much because I was doing 3 days a week before we went nightly, and I'm still doing 3 nights a week now. It's just that other people are doing those other 2 days. Eve and the Apple asks Novara staff skincare regime. Now I have to admit I don't have one, but I am pondering whether to because I've got these lines that go. Maybe you can't see them in this lighting, but I've got these. I think they're sort of wrinkles, like kind of speed lines that go down there. And I'm wondering whether to start with, is it retinol or that? The one that stops
Yeah, so
wrinkles.
the thing about retinol is that it's very harsh. So I use tretinool, which I basically order from India because like you can't get it in the UK, and I mix it with
Hmm.
my regular moisturizer. You only use it at night, and you use just a tiny, tiny amount. And then in the day, you have to use an SPF. The moisturizer that I'd recommend, Michael, is the CeraVe Face and Body Moisturizing Lay Hydration something. It's not an expensive one, but it is the one which, I've gone through moisturizer after moisturizer for my face, and this is the one which has really worked. So CeraVe, tiny little bit of retinol, SPF during the day. Oh,
All right,
cleanser,
send me that
because
on.
if you
Send me that
start
on WhatsApp.
moisturizing, yeah, and a good
Oh,
cleanser. You need a good cleanser if you're going to start putting moisturizers on your face, because otherwise you're going to break out.
oh, with spots.
Yeah.
Oh, what a nightmare! This is why I don't. I feel like I don't use anything because I feel like once you start using one thing, then you have to use other things to correct for what the one thing does wrong. Like Vaseline, I've got quite dry lips at the moment, so you shouldn't be taking lip advice because I got a filling today actually, and they manipulate your mouth so much that I always end up with very dry lips afterwards. Luckily, the life is back into my cheek. But anyway, the argument I was going to make, a very important argument I was going to make, is that Vaseline seems to be addictive to. I think if you use Vaseline once, you have to just keep on using it, and I think that many skincare routines, regimens, products are, designed to get you hooked. You use them once and then suddenly you become reliant on them. So I'm more of a kind of don't use any of them and hope for the best. Which but yeah, now I've got these wrinkles here and my
So
lips don't
can
look
I
amazing. Anyway,
can I say something?
yeah, go
Can I
on.
say something which I feel quite strongly about? I don't
Yeah.
mind getting older, and I don't mind looking older. And while I believe in skincare, because I think you should look after your skin, it is the largest organ of the human body. I think all this stuff about wanting to look the same way you did when you're in your early 20s or something, it's ridiculous. And like, I know that it's particularly strong for women, there are pressures on men too. But when I think about this, like, insistence that women have to look the same way that they did when they were 18 throughout their lives. I mean, I just think it's so stupid. Like, I'm genuinely not afraid of looking older. I got my first white hair, it's like somewhere in the middle of my head, and definitely getting like the old, smile lines, crow's feet, whatever you want to call them. And I think that's fine because sure, you don't look as young as you did as when you were young. But the thing about getting older is that you only get smarter and you meet some people who are like, you know, they're in their like 50s, 60s, 70s, and they've got that lifetime of reading and experience and analyses and nuance behind them. And it's so fucking impressive. And in my head, I'm like, okay, so what would I rather have? Would I rather look the same way I did when I was 18? Or would I want the brain of like Noam Chomsky or like Gary Young or people who've got like decades of their career behind them and have got all of that knowledge to call on? I'd want the latter. So don't get too freaked out about looking older, Michael, but do moisturize.
Get your skincare routines from Chomsky. That's our advice. Anne Hayfield says you're both too young for skincare. Just drink water. I think I'm happy to stick with that. Controversial, because the one thing everyone says is keep out of the sun, but my view there is I think the best look for someone later in life is old, leathery, tanned skin. So even though it's sort of like leathery and maybe has some cracks in it, I prefer that to sort of the translucent skin of someone who's stayed out of the sun their whole lives. Rich Cole Rich asks if you had to take one Tory MP to Adonis, who would you take? Hi, Rich Cole Rich. I think Michael Gove would probably have the best stash, and I'm kind of cheap, so I like to go with someone who's brought their own supplies. Ash.
You know what? I've still never been to Adonis. I've never been to Adonis.
Ah, what used to be
Do
in
you think I
Tottenham, your
should go
neck of
to
the woods. Now
Adonis?
it's yeah. Come on New Year's Day. Come on New Year's Day with me.
All right, I'll do it.
I'm bringing Ash as the Tory MP. I'm bringing.
I don't have my own stash, I'm
Uh,
afraid. I'm a complete bum as well.
Maria Norwich with a tenner. Merry Christmas to all at Novara. How will the UK, sorry, react to Scottish independence in 2024? Um, the implication being that Scotland's going to get independence in 2024, which I wasn't aware of. It seems to me that sort of the movement for Scottish independence is a bit of a low ebb at the moment.
Um,
But
I mean,
any
look,
any
this
thoughts on
might
that,
be one
Ash?
of those predictions, which that might be one of those predictions where you're like, oh, Leicester to win the Premier League, and then it happens, you're like, oh, fucking
Mm.
hell. But it doesn't seem like it's likely for 2024. I wonder if this might be a reference to a famous Star Trek Next Generation meme where Data makes a reference to the Irish unification of 2024. But maybe I've just
Hmm.
exposed myself as a complete nerd because I do really like Star Trek. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I've never watched Star Trek, but I feel like there probably is quite a lot to gain from it. I'm thinking maybe to start reading sci-fi,
Oh,
but
you
I've been
definitely
thinking that for a
should. You
while.
definitely should. And like the thing about
Do you
Star
read?
Trek is that
Do
it's
you read
essentially
sci-fi?
utopian. It's oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, I read sci-fi. Um I like Ursula Le Guin. I think one of my favorite sci-fi books I've ever read is Three Body Problem. But the reason why I'd say, especially if you're a bit of an optimist, Michael, you should watch Star Trek, is that the idea is that humans have overcome scarcity and they've overcome war and they've overcome racism. And this is a future which is post scarcity, post capitalism, post racism, post oppression. Although because it was created by a man during the 1960s, there are still loads of women in like short skirts and there are aliens always getting them pregnant against their will, which is, a universe where there's no scarcity, but there is sexism.
And also, you never see. So I don't really watch it, but do you ever see crowds of people in Star Trek? Because I suppose my sort of from seeing it from afar, it seems to me like a universe Might be utopian, but where did all the 8 billion people go? I suppose space is large, but
Yeah, because you don't see that, but I think that's a budget and casting issue rather than a that's what the universe is like.
okay, yeah. I worry
Like,
with
it's
some
still a
of the
TV show,
interstellar stuff that,
Michael.
yeah, yeah. Well, I worry with the sort of interstellar stuff that, you know, the rich people get to buy their nice spaceship and then everyone else is sort of left to die on the Earth. This is I shouldn't say that as an optimist, but I mean catastrophic climate
No, no,
change is
no.
possible. I'm
People on the Earth are having a great time. In Star Trek, people on Earth are having a lovely time. They've got like,
okay. This
these like teleporting machines. So, if me and you were in the office and we were like, oh, I'm really craving Mexican food. Bam, we're in Oaxaca. Not Oaxaca with a W, Oaxaca with a OAX.
I can't believe your your utopia just means a quicker travel time to Oaxaca from the Novara Media office. Uh, Bertie with 20 quid on Super Chat. Hate to break it to you, Ash. I'm in my 60s and not all my peers are wise. What do you say to that?
Okay, well, I'll be a dumb, hot 60-year-old. Maybe that's fine.
Fraser asks, "What's your go-to karaoke song?" I'm actually going to a karaoke pub after this, so I have been thinking about this today. But
Are
I
you
was thinking
going
of
to the one
Fairy
which
Tale in
is
New
near my
York.
house?
Yeah, do you want to come?
Oh yeah, I might do after. I'm going for dinner with my sister, but afterwards maybe. So Fairy Tale of New York is your
Yeah,
favorite.
well, I was thinking of Fairy Tale of New York, but it's an Irish pub, and I was thinking going to an Irish pub at Christmas and being the one that sings Fairy Tale at New York. Maybe that's a bit presumptuous, you know. Maybe there is an Irish person that wants to sing Fairy Tale in New York, and they'll be like, why did that guy take that song? Maybe it's cultural appropriation. I don't know. Ash, do you have a preferred a preferred karaoke song?
So the thing is that I can't sing, and I know that everyone says that they can't sing, but I like really like can't sing, can't sing. Um, so often it's Britney Spears' "Baby One More Time" because you don't need great range for that song, or as demonstrated at a Novara karaoke staff party. Um, if I partner with someone else and we do Numb Encore, I can do the Jay-Z part fairly well. Fairly well. I can do it all right.
You do encore actually, and it was very good. It's a very good karaoke number. It's one. It's not necessarily a classic one, but it does encore by. It's Linkin Park, right? Linkin Park and Jay Z
Yeah,
encore.
it's Linkin Park,
The
Jay-Z.
the song has aged well. I think that's my top tip for any Christmas parties you might be hosting. Put on encore by Linkin Park and Jay Z, and everyone's going to say good things about you and your party and your friends. Ash, I said we'd keep it casual. I think we did. Um, I'll see you later this evening, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe later this evening. But I also might get really pissed with my sister, in which case, see you in 2024 at Adonis.
If, yeah. If not, yeah, find me at the bar tonight asking Irish people if it would be, culturally okay for me to maybe put down Fairy Tale in New York for a karaoke song, or would that be a bit presumptuous? You know. Thank you for joining us tonight. We will leave it there. If we didn't get to your question, we'll be having a lot more of these Q&As in 2024. Have a fantastic Christmas. Have a fantastic New Year. Thank you so much for spending your time with us in 2023. It has been an absolute pleasure broadcasting to you. Well, personally, 3 nights a week, and then Novara in general, 5 nights a week, and downstreams and all sorts. We've had massive growth this year. We are very appreciative of it as ever. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.